The actual snapping of the wrist, as you can see, because of the elbow going downwards, going over their arm.
Hi, I'm Martin of the UK Win Chun Association, and we found that not only are these pads useful for the kind of angles and chops that you saw Mark Phillips demonstrate earlier on, but the narrowness of the side of the pad is also excellent for promoting accuracy in these fast bursts of chain punches. So as you can see, you're forced to keep into this narrow target area and not allow your punches to drift from side to side. The next movement we're going to be looking at is Hyun Sao, circling hand. You'll recognise the movement from the third section of your first form, and it's most commonly used to escape from a dangerous inside gate position to circle around and come to a more safer outside gate. It can also be used at times, if you've got contact with both hands, to force your partner to move out, leaving you free to come through the middle. I'll be demonstrating both these movements later on. But now I'd like to talk about the application on the wall bag. Okay, when you start, what you're looking at doing is keeping your thumb strong, circling your hand, drawing your elbow away. It's vitally important that you keep your elbow in. When we start talking about application later on, you'll see how this will prevent you simply from being circled back on and using the same move that you're trying to do against you. So, as you draw back, keep your thumb strong and your elbow in, and then drive your palm heel forward into the bag. So as you come away, keep your thumb strong, the elbow close to your body, and as you go forward, drive your palm heel into the bag. As you keep your thumb strong and circle, you'll start to feel, after quite a few of these, you'll really feel your forearm start to fill up with blood, and you'll really start to build up strength in your forearm and wrist areas. We also use open-handed strikes to hit around. If you can imagine that you're punching and throwing punches wide as they come about, you've got to get to such an extreme angle to hit with the knuckle that it's likely that for the majority of the time you're actually going to be hitting with the edge of your fist. Now for a boxer it's fine because he's got his hands bound and a glove on top of it. But if you're thinking about punching these wild punches around with your fists, you're actually going to break your hands up pretty quickly. So we actually hit the same way around but with an open palm. Hitting with the heel of the palm, just like with your palm strikes, coming around and hitting up. So just go on that side, coming around and belting across. The other advantage of using open-handed strikes is that you don't have to tense in the same way. It doesn't tense you up, you can stay relaxed and come through and hit without the danger of smashing up your hand. You can see as Celine moves in, there's no way this pattern's going to be set. It's random shapes, pick from a maximum of 5, and you're going to have to find your weight and hit whenever the opportunity arises. So wherever you are, you have the ability to plant your weight and hit with the maximum power as you come across. Now the next movement we're going to be looking at is called guacho, or rolling punch. It's a movement you'll be familiar with from your basic lock-style training. However, when we start working on the bag, it becomes important to speak about which area of the hand we're going to be working with. Now there's a lot of delicate bones down the back of your hand leading into your fingers. So if we start smashing around and damaging these, it's going to result in loss of feeling, loss of use of the fingers. So it's important to cock the wrist back so we actually still connect with the knuckles as opposed to the back of the hand. As we're most familiar with it from lock sao, it can be used from a bong sao movement, coming over towards the head or even dropping underneath into the short or even down into the floating ribs. Even in an extreme case, the reverse of guacho, ping shui down towards the body, can start to be used into the groin. Now we'll start working onto the bag. It's important when you use the bag that you use it to visualise the techniques that you're doing. So you actually visualise and imagine an opponent and imagine what's going on. So when you're doing this lower movement for ping shui, make sure you understand that you're drawing and pulling the arm up to create space underneath. You're not larping down and closing it off. So come across, cover, take the arm and hit down. Cover and hit down. Making sure to draw the arm back to leave space to hit down into the ribs. It's also important to visualise when going high the fact that you're taking the arm down but dropping your weight down into the technique as well. So drop your weight down and use your whole body to come over to add weight into the strike. It's also possible to start dropping your elbow down to start smashing and destroying into the limbs, even hitting down in with the forearm as well. So make sure you drop and bend your knees so you can sink and start to raise up. Sink and start to bounce off and raise back up.
Wing Chun was made famous by Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's contribution was in demonstrating short distance power at a karate tournament in California in the 60s. People had never seen this kind of power developed before because most people were using massive muscular movements with strong hard blocks derived from some of the Japanese martial arts that were more common at the time. Wing Chun, being a close range fighting system, relied incredibly on acceleration over short distance. This acceleration, this gaining of speed, is what generates the power of Wing Chun. One of the ways we can generate that power is through chi sao or sticky hands, and the other way of generating that kind of power is by having a fixed target like the war bag on which we can focus and train safely. What you're also noticing, there was little wrist movements and acceleration into the technique, and these movements were ways of developing and increasing the speed over the short distance that we have. In a confrontational situation, it's very likely the person is going to get to what people call conversation range. It is a nice phrase, however, I must admit there's not much conversation going on because conversation indicates that somebody's listening. Generally, nobody's listening, there's two people arguing. So in this kind of particular situation, you're confronted already by the distance being incredibly close. So you're going to try to generate power from that distance. In Pure and Simple, our first video, we discussed the development of short distance power to quite an extent, and I would refer you to that video for more information. However, I'm now going to give you an idea of how to use short distance power on a war bag. So Wing Chun relies on short distance power. We're now going to hit a bag and develop this idea. One of the problems of being at short range is that you get jammed. And what you've got to try to do is try to create space. If your hands were pulled down and someone was trapping you, then one of the things you can do if you feel threatened of being hit is actually move closer into the opponent. So if someone pulls your arms down, you sometimes smother up in order to take away the opportunity for somebody to attack you. Very similar to something you may already be familiar with. When someone tries to kick you, you step and you jam in on that distance. It's exactly the same principle. So understanding that this is very easily jammed, we often use the body and move it to one side. So we start off by strengthening the basic tricep of the body and the explosion from these smaller muscle groups rather than the major muscle groups. So we start by simply working the wrist. You can punch into the midsection, the low section, the high section. That really doesn't make too much difference in this application. So hit, place your fingertips in contact, and then hit by accelerating gradually across the distance, like so. There. So you start to develop some power in short distance and making impact before the fist. So what happens is this: you get your fingers out of the way and you accelerate into the strike. You take your fingers out of the way and accelerate. So instead of feeling this or hearing this kind of idea and the fist not being well formed, you punch, you punch, you punch. So from there you punch, you punch, you punch. So you can actually hear there's impact. Certainly not the strongest punch you'll ever feel, but a good well-placed technique onto the nose is very good indeed. So what we're going to do is hit from this distance. So the next thing you'll realise is that the technique becomes jammed when you're very close. So you stand close to the bag, but you stand to one side. When you stand to one side, you're now no longer jammed by your own elbows, and you can now hear already the punch has more power. So don't stand right in the centre trying to punch from a ridiculously close situation. If you're that close, it really does come down to using elbows, and I would never recommend you use your elbows on a war bag. So you're punching from just a few inches forward. But yes, you will get stronger, you will develop more powerful punches. But by moving to the side and travelling the same distance, you can suddenly generate a massively heavy punch from the same distance. So from here, your hand is a few inches away from the pad. In this case, one hand distance away from the pad, from the bag. Move to the side, drive your punch in. Transfer your body weight not onto the leg you're sitting, but onto the opposite leg, and drive your weight through the target. So from this position, you're punching forward, short range punching, but potentially jammed. Shift your body, shift your body, shift your body, utilise the hips, transfer the weight through the target. The elbow is still in, look, it just moves across, drives into the target. This way, you stop yourself from being jammed. Okay, so in Wing Chun you also need to be able to hit when your elbow is pushed. So one of the things that happens is our elbow gets pressed, as you can see. So see if Nick Martin was doing the techniques of Hyun Sao, the circling hand, and you saw that as he was doing this, he was pressing across with the hand. That means his opponent is having his elbow trapped against his body. So another thing you should consider training is having your hand across the side of your body and hit across. Just so hit, across, across. And then take this logically further and further away to see if you can hit into the back. So from here, you should stretch, hit into the back, stretch, hit into the back, stretch, hit into the back, hit into the back, hit into the back. So gradually, you're stretching, maintaining the flexibility, and striking right across the body. So if your elbow is pressed, you have the ability to escape and still come back with multiple punches. So this strike will break some contact, allow you to get your hands free, and then you can move in with a rapid series of punches. So Wing Chun relies on a variety of hand techniques, and so far you've seen punches, and you've seen side punches, you've seen forward punches, you've seen chops of various descriptions as well. Now we're going to move on to the palm strikes, which are generally hitting with this area of the hand as opposed to this area of the hand. So we're now striking along this edge here instead of this edge here. So as you strike, what you'll find is it's very important to accelerate and to turn the palm outwards so the fingers get out of the way. As a general rule, this has a lifting effect into a strike. Strikes up, strikes up, strikes up. And what makes it so powerful is that from finger distance, you can strike in. From finger distance, you can strike in effectively. This was covered quite extensively in the first video, Pure and Simple once again, but I want to show you how you can use these lines on the bag to great effect. So firstly, we have the mid-low section palm strike, which Sifu Nick Martin was doing with the Huon. Strike. Accelerate the wrist, just strike in like so. Same area, up high. Here, here, here. So work from short distance. If you're in struggle, try and accelerate from the short range to hit with the heel of the palm. Simply get your fingers out, drive them into the bag. As you hit the bag, you're going to need to shake it to distill it, to make it smooth again so that one side's not totally compressed. Then you have your forward palm strikes from here. As you can see, the action of the movement has the fingers dragging off of the bag. As you strike, like so. The reason for that is to emphasize as the beginner that you want to elevate your palm. Elevate your palm. So if you can just get this general idea, you'll start to accelerate and accentuate the use of this part of the palm.
When striking to the low areas of the bag, you'll notice that we turn the fist accordingly. So in the upper area we strike with the upright fist. In the midsection we begin to turn the fist at about 45 degrees because this keeps the elbow close to the body and allows us to use the weight from the back leg more effectively. We also strike low with an upturned fist. It's not quite an uppercut. A lot of people misinterpret it as an uppercut, but it isn't. It's a low, straight strike. Well, you can also turn palm strikes accordingly too. So when we strike low, we also can use the side-lying palm, which you've already seen demonstrated, and we can also strike low using a rising palm strike. And we have a downward palm strike where the fingers point down and we elevate the wrist and the forearm so we're moving into the technique. The rising palm is used with the fingers pointing down against somebody doing an overhand strike to you. So if you could move to the outside gate and rise the palm, then what you'll find is you get good perpendicular point of contact on your opponent. This is the best way to transfer the weight of your strike effectively into your opponent. With the low straight palm strike, then what you'll find is that you're using the technique with a lot of wrist movement, and this movement is emphasized at close range in techniques like Popeye Jung, which is a double palm push. Most of the time it's not as effective as a strike. It can be used as a strike, but most of the time most people use it to concentrate an element of diversion to press the person away. So when you have double hand contact, we will use that technique to deflect the person away, taking the pressure off yourself, allowing for an escape or for a follow-up strike.
So on this bag, because of my height, I'm going to be working onto the top section. It really wouldn't matter if you, depending on your height, if you were lower, if you were working particularly with the tarn cell toward the midsection. So tarn, 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 tarn. So visualize two moves. Coming back, coming back, coming back. Forward, forward, forward. If you're not in contact, forward. If you are in contact, follow it back, take the hand away and strike. Forward, strike, forward, strike, forward, strike. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you can start to now see the potential for using different movements from here, putting it together. So you could go from turn down to gun, to gun, to turn, to bong larp, rolling, standing larp, back to gun, turn and park, and just see the potential to visualise some very simple counterattacks.
You'll often hear that a martial artist's hands are considered lethal weapons. Really, they're only just tools of the trade. However, every tradesman will tell you that you need the correct tool for the job. If you're punching somebody clean on the face, maybe on the nose, then an upright Wing Chun fist is a great target. However, if you're striking towards the throat, as we've already shown, sometimes you need to use a chop. At other times, if you're striking round, it's a good idea to slap, as Sifu Nick Martin will demonstrate, because in this situation here, there's less risk of breaking your hands on people's hard heads. If you're going to strike towards the throat, another way that we use is to use a half fist, sometimes called a leopard or a panther fist in other styles of martial art. And what you're going to do is strike forward using the knuckle area of the hand to just wedge your way forward and strike into a dropping chin. It's a very effective strike and can be done as a jab. So basically just to strike forward, and it suddenly becomes a very useful weapon on its own. When training on the wall bag with this weapon, you don't need to train too hard with too much physical weight. What you want to do is just condition the knuckle area so that you don't actually damage yourself when you're striking in. What you're doing is you're striking into the larynx in particular. When striking into this area, of course some force is necessary, but not the same kind of body weight that's needed to penetrate into the trunk of a person. When you're striking forward on the wall bag, go gently and proceed carefully. Another devastating weapon in Wing Chun is the single knuckle, sometimes termed a phoenix eye. Basically, when you're striking forward in Wing Chun, we have the upturn of the fist. So what you'll see is that upturn of the fist, which is particularly emphasized in the short distance power. When you're striking forward, therefore, that means the bottom three knuckles are prime target areas that we've explained many times. But it does enable us to have this free top finger, the index finger, which, as you know, can be used to strike out and strike particularly well towards the eye, or used in pressure situations behind the ear or up under the jaw, where it can be incredibly painful. We often use it on all pressure points, it's very effective, but where it's particularly devastating is as a jab situation onto the eye. Boxers used to use a similar movement where they used to strike forward with the thumb towards the eye. A particularly effective movement because obviously it's devastatingly painful and damages the vision of the person. But in Wing Chun we have that single knuckle strike striking straight towards the eye, and basically it becomes an incredibly painful and effective move. Boxers ended up stitching the glove area to prevent this weapon being used. Wing Chun, without the constraints and restraints of rules and regulations, uses this movement to great effect.
The elbow can be used in many different ways: butting, hacking, chopping. Initially we're going to go through some techniques on the heavy bag, then we're going to use some opponents to show some technical applications of the elbow. With the butting elbow, your area of contact is the forearm, the middle of the forearm. When you go through, the elbow doesn't hack across, the movement is actually driven through using the body as well. So you're actually stepping in as you make contact with the elbow. You step in, make contact with the elbow. There is no swing across of the elbow as you would do if you're attacking with the elbow, maybe to the face or one of the body areas. So you step in with the elbow using your footwork, step in, drive in. But there's still a strike with the elbow to the body, forcing your opponent back. Forcing your opponent back. Markin. butted elbow can also be combined with a turn for more effective attack. So you're striking one movement, driving forward, and the second movement comes in using the turn. In. Again, be sure not to swing the elbows across. You should always make sure that when you're using the button elbow, you don't overturn the arm. Make sure that the area you're striking with is the bony part of the arm, the outside edge. So when you make contact with the outside edge. Don't overturn and strike with the inner part, the muscle, the softer part of your arm. You want to make contact with the heavy, stronger part on the outside edge of the bone. The next elbow attack we're going to go through is the hacking elbow. The hacking elbow can be a very, very, very devastating attacking movement. It can be used from a distance where you actually step in and use the elbow to attack, keeping your partner up holding at bay, stepping in and hacking in with the elbow. It can be used in close quarters with the arms even trapped, freeing your arms and hacking down with the elbow. It can also be used as a defensive movement against an opponent's attack, where they go to elbow and you use the elbow to cover and attack back.
Here we see Parminder Bandal working on the heavy bag. In Wing Chun, as well as in all other martial arts, we work on the heavy bag quite extensively because of the ability to let the punches go more freely. Some would say even carefreely, because you can throw hooks and uppercuts into bags, which you simply could not do onto a wall bag. The other great advantage is the ability to feel the weight of the bag as it swings back to you and stop it in its tracks, just strengthening your stance, and also the ability to swing punches quite heavily using the hips and using the body weight for strength and conditioning. Here you can see Martin Burton just setting off with his left and switching across to his right leg. Martin is working with the bag gloves because once you start to throw these bags heavily and the bag spins, it's a good idea just to protect the hand and wrist with wearing a pair of bag gloves. Remember that when you jab into a bag, you should remember that when you're retreating from the bag to often punch on the way out as well. So punch into the bag as it comes towards you, and as you back off, very often you want to throw some strong punches back into the bag on the way out. When you're working with a live opponent, he can move, so make sure you play around with the distance judgment, working on an outside circle, so imagining a particular range which somebody can't